Tēnā koutou te whānau o Aotearoa Unitarians. Tēnā koutou ngā manuhiri. No mai, haere mai ki tēnei hui topa a te atua. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome once again to our virtual sanctuary. This morning we're going to explore how our generosity is witness to our capacity to reform our world. Does it seek justice or merely support the status quo? I offer these words by Unitarian theologian Rebecca Parker to get us started on our journey. In the midst of a world marked by tragedy and beauty, there must be those who bear witness against unnecessary destruction and who, with faith, rise and lead in freedom with grace and power. There must be those who speak honestly and do not avoid seeing what must be seen of sorrow and outrage or tenderness and wonder. There must be those whose grief troubles the water while their voices sing and speak refreshed worlds. There must be those whose exuberance rises with lovely energy that articulates earth's joy. There must be those who are restless for respectful and loving companionship among human beings, whose presence invites people to be themselves without fear. There must be those who gather with the congregation of remembrance and compassion, draw water from old wells, and walk the simple path of love for neighbor. And there must be communities of people who seek to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God, who call on the strength of soul force to heal, transform, and bless life. There must be religious witness. If you have a candle, now is the time for our chalice light. Love is the aspiration, the spirit that moves and inspires this faith we share. Rightly understood, love can nurture our spirits and transform the world. May the flame of this chalice honor and embody the power and the blessing of the love we need, the love we give, the love we are challenged always to remember and to share. In my ongoing efforts to explore other music besides that found in our UU hymnal, our opening song is by Peter Meyer, and it's called Everything is Holy Now. And I also light this virtual candle for all those joys and concerns in our hearts and minds that are unspoken. Okay. My reading for this morning is entitled A Mother's Socks. It's by Geoffrey Lockwood. Once upon a time, a thief snuck into the room of a sleeping Buddhist monk. As the burglar rummaged about, the monk awoke. The startled thief ran into the snowy streets with the monk racing after him. "Please stop," the monk called. And the man finally did, realizing that his pursuer was no threat. You'll need this, the monk gasped, handing the thief his own coat. What do you mean? The man asked. I saw that you dashed from my room into the cold without so much as a winter wrap. I realized I had both a woolen blanket and a coat. Having heard this implausible tale of sainthood years ago, I forgot the details, but remembered the essential events. Ordinary people can't be morally compelled to make such extraordinary sacrifices. But for whatever reason, perhaps the sheer absurdity of such unconditional altruism, this parable stuck with me. It rattled around in my skeptical mind until the day my wife played the role of the Buddhist monk. Nan and I headed into the mountains for a day of skiing with our children, who were 4 and 6 at the time. In the chaos of packing up that morning, we'd forgotten our daughter's mittens. The wind was whipping and mercury hovered in the teens, so no mittens meant no skiing. But for Nan, the solution was as obvious as it was simple. She always wore 2 pairs of socks. So she removed the outer layer and pulled them over Aaron's hands. Problem solved. We headed down the trail. I found her approach rather clever. The sort of practical motherly thinking that often eludes my analytical mind, but hardly heroic. However, the bitter cold and the woolen warmth evoked the parable of the monk's coat. Among the snow-hushed pines, I remembered how the dialogue ended. I don't understand, man. It's simple. You have nothing at all to keep you warm, the monk answered. But you are a fool to give away your coat, leaving you only with a blanket. The man replied, reaching for the garment. If I had 2 gloves on one hand and none on the other, I would be a fool to put one of them on my bare hand, the monk asked. The man said nothing, took the coat, and hurried down the street. When we are not alienated, when love draws us into the suffering of others, when we see our happiness entwined in their well-being, then generosity is neither foolish nor heroic. It's the simple and most obvious choice. Before my musings, I'm going to offer you another song. I've played it once before, a while back. Some of you may remember it. But it's the song, it's written by Michael Jackson. It's his favorite. Apparently, he was proudest of this song of all the many things he wrote. But this one isn't sung by Michael or played by him. It's done by children. So I hope you enjoy it. I do love that particular song and that version of it. Well, it took me a while to decide what to call my musings this week, but I settled on Be the Pebble in the Pond. As your minister, one of the riskier things I do is to offer choosing a sermon title to bid on at the service auction. Perhaps one of the more challenging ones I have been given was concocted by Paul Henriques. He wanted me to muse on Unitarian Universalism and philanthropy, past, present, and future. I confess I would never have come up with this topic on my own. Even if it had crossed my mind, I would have quickly discovered very little has been written about it. And what has been written is in scholarly articles I'm unable to access without enrolling in an academic institution. So thanks, Paul, for a mission impossible. Your topic did remind me of my wiseacre response before my vocational path became clear to the question of what I wanted to do when I grew up. I said I wanted to make $1 million. That was back when that was real money and not a down payment on a house. So I could be a philanthropist. As I never achieved the prerequisite, I have given up making my first million, so now I'm working on my second. I still think being a philanthropist would be a great career choice, even though it is incompatible with a minister's stipend. But after delving into Paul's topic, I have learned being a philanthropist is a can of worms that is not necessarily compatible with my Unitarian Universalist values. If you're surprised, so was I. I associate both charity and philanthropy with generosity, which is certainly something UUs value. Charity, after all, is derived from the Latin word for love, caritas. Philanthropy in Greek means love for humanity. Since their meanings are nearly synonymous, they are often thought to be interchangeable. Yes, they're both about giving, but they have different motives for doing so and different outcomes from the act. While it's not quite this simple, charity aims to relieve the pain of a particular social problem, whereas philanthropy attempts to address the root cause of the problem. Both have a long history, going back to before the Common Era. Both have evolved in their practice over several millennia. Both have been affected by the cultures in which they are practiced. Both have done considerable good in the world when focused on social justice. Both have frequently failed to live up to their purposes, and both have been subject to criticism from Unitarians. Before Unitarians were a formal denomination, there were Unitarian charitable organizations that focused on social justice, particularly helping the poor, civil rights, and political reform. These were not the goals of traditional Victorian philanthropy. In 1795, the English Unitarian George Dyer set out his vision of the relationship between philanthropy and justice. There would be less occasion to erect so many temples to charity if we erected more to justice. Early Unitarian philanthropist and feminist Catherine Kapp transcended traditional philanthropy by developing relationships with its recipients. She didn't create justice through financial largesse, but by establishing with women, children, and the poor the schools and training in trades to make a difference. Unitarian author Elizabeth Cleghorn Gaskell wrote 3 novels that criticized Victorian philanthropy. She saw it as perpetuating class distinctions that raised up the elite and diminished the poor and working class. Too much of the philanthropy did not further social justice, but benefited the middle class, ignoring those for whom it was intended. A significant Unitarian critic of philanthropy was, of course, Charles Dickens. In the last of his serialized novels, Martin Chuzzlewit, his overall theme is selfishness, which he deals with using satire. In it is Dickens' quote, "Charity begins at home, and justice lives next door," by which he means the selfish take advantage of others for their own benefit, while justice is ignored. While in the midst of writing Chuzzlewit, Dickens published the counterpoint to that novel, the story A Christmas Carol, clearly a tribute to redemption through generosity. We need to move to the present day and the need to carry on the Unitarian role of critic of modern philanthropy. Philanthropy is supposed to transfer money from the rich to the poor. This is not what happens. In the US, which statistics show to be the most philanthropic of nations, barely a fifth of the money donated by big givers goes to the poor. A lot goes to the arts, sports teams, and other cultural pursuits, and half goes to education and healthcare. The biggest donations in education in 2019 went to the elite universities and schools that the rich themselves attended. The common assumption that philanthropy automatically results in a redistribution of money is wrong. A lot of elite philanthropy is about elite causes. Rather than making the world a better place, or in Michael Jackson's words, healing the world, it largely reinforces the world as it is. Philanthropy very often favors the rich, and no one holds philanthropists to account for it. Philanthropy is always an expression of power. Giving often depends on the personal whims of super rich individuals. Sometimes these coincide with the priorities of society, but other times they contradict or undermine them. Increasingly, questions have begun to be raised about the impact of these mega donations, what the impact is they're having upon the priorities of society. There are a number of tensions inherent in the relationship between philanthropy and democracy. For all the huge benefits modern philanthropy can bring, the sheer scale of contemporary giving can skew spending to the extent that it can overwhelm the priorities of democratically elected governments and local authorities. The late German billionaire, shipping magnate, and philanthropist Peter Kramer called some philanthropy a bad transfer of power from democratically elected politicians to billionaires, so that it no longer it is no longer the state that determines what is good for the people, but rather the rich who decide. Then there is the reality that what the rich are giving away in their philanthropy is not entirely their own money. Tax relief adds the money of ordinary citizens to the causes chosen by rich individuals. Most Western governments offer generous tax incentives to encourage charitable giving. Super rich philanthropists, therefore, find themselves in a position where a large percentage, 45% in most cases, of their gift is funded by the taxpayer. Tax exemptions for charities have existed in the UK since income tax was introduced in 1799, though charities have been largely exempt from certain taxes since the Elizabethan age. Indeed, British tax relief is still largely confined to the categories of charity set out in the 1601 Charitable Uses Act, which lists 4 categories of charity: relief of poverty, advancement of education, promotion of religion, and other purposes beneficial to the community. Both the US and the UK offer additional incentives where donations are made to endow a charitable foundation. This enables a philanthropist to escape liability for tax on the donation, yet also retain control over how the money is spent within the constraints of charity law. The effect of this is often to give the wealthy control in matters that would otherwise be determined by the state. Through family trusts, this is the major form of philanthropy in Aotearoa. The choices made by philanthropists tend to reinforce social inequalities rather than reduce them. That said, philanthropy can be compatible with justice, but it requires a conscious effort on behalf of philanthropists to make it so. The default inclines in the opposite direction. Reinhold Niebuhr, in his 1932 book, Moral Man and Immoral Society, suggests why. Philanthropy combines genuine pity with the display of power, which explains why the powerful are more inclined to be generous than to grant social justice. Philanthropy can recover a genuine sense of altruism only by understanding that it cannot do the job of either government or business, for it belongs not to the political nor the commercial realm, but to civil society and the world of social institutions that mediate between individuals, the market, and the state. They're called not to be in league with either, but a reformer of both, seeking justice. As members of Auckland Unitarians, we are a part of a charitable trust. Corporately, we are philanthropists then. Individually, we may never be numbered amongst the rich, but that does not absolve us from seeking reforms in our society that promote justice and protect our democratic institutions. We may be small like a pebble, but tossed in a pond, we can make ripples. We have before. It is our calling. I'd like to conclude this musing with a a meditation by Debra Smith. We are hungry. We are eating our daily bread and bowing our heads, and yet we are hungry. We are thanking the farmer and the farm worker, and yet we are hungry. We are speaking in spaces for food that is healthy, and still we are hungry. We are tiring of slogans that say, feed the children, and Mead, feed the children leftovers. We're hungry for something that feeds more than bodies. We are hungry for help. Help us, O you who apportion the funds. Find in your hearts the child who you were, who would share with a friend, free and friendly. Lead us not into meanness, for we are the hungry. We want the loaves and the fishes, the water and the wine of sweet justice for all. We are hungry. And now I'll play our closing song. We have played it before. It's actually in our hymnal, our supplemental hymnal. And so you may have picked up some of the words. And the lyrics are here, so sing along. My closing words are words you've probably heard before, but it's good to be reminded of. They're by Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And now let's extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Here's your question for breakout. What motivates your giving? How do you choose where to give? Is it charitable or philanthropic in nature? What motivates your giving? How do you choose where to give? Is it charitable or philanthropic in nature?